The entire restaurant froze the moment the old man walked back through those doors. But this time, he wasn't wearing faded jeans or an old jacket. He stood in a tailored navy suit, flanked by two quiet security men whose presence alone shifted the air. Conversations dropped. Forks hovered midair, and the waiter who mocked him yesterday went pale, gripping a tray that rattled in his trembling hands as he realized the awful truth. The poor nobody he had insulted was the billionaire owner of the restaurant. And tonight, he wasn't here for dinner. He was here to settle something. If moments like this remind you why stories of justice and second chances still matter in America, go ahead and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing our stories connect people all across the country. All right, let's get back to the story. Hours earlier, Nashville's streets glowed with the soft gold of early evening light, the kind that made the storefronts feel older than they were. Daniel Cross drove his pickup through the quieter side of town, a place he knew well despite his wealth. Success had changed his finances, yes, but it never changed his habits. He still stopped for his own coffee, pumped his own gas, and made time to listen, really listen, when people told him things weren't going right. He had heard enough stories about the Meridian, stories that carried the same tune, seniors feeling rushed, veterans being spoken to like burdens, folks in modest clothing treated like afterthoughts. It didn't sit right with him, especially because he owned the place, even if nobody knew. That night, when he walked in dressed simply, he didn't expect a parade. He expected kindness, basic human decency. What he got instead was a lesson in arrogance. The hostess, a soft-spoken young woman, offered him a warm smile and guided him to a table. But before she could even hand him the menu, the waiter named Alex swooped in with a smirk that curled lazily at the corners of his mouth. "This section is full. I'll put him somewhere else," he said dismissively, steering Daniel toward a smaller table near the kitchen doors. Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded and thanked the hostess, whose apologetic glance said everything she wasn't allowed to say. Alex placed a menu on the table with a thud. "Just giving you a heads up," he said, tapping the laminated cover. "Prices here aren't exactly budget-friendly." Daniel looked up calmly. "I'll manage, thank you." Alex scoffed quietly, loud enough for two nearby diners to hear. "Yeah, we'll see." He walked off, leaving Daniel sitting alone with the steady thumping of swinging kitchen doors beside him. He didn't mind noise. He didn't mind being placed in a corner. What he minded was the tone, the quick, cutting way some people spoke when they believed the world beneath them. A few minutes later, the female waitress, Emily, approached with a gentle smile. She carried herself like someone raised by parents who insisted on kindness even when no one was looking. "I'm sorry for the wait," she said softly. "I can take your order if you'd like." Daniel nodded gratefully. "Thank you. Just the soup and coffee would be nice." She wrote it down and added in a whisper, "If you need anything, you can call me instead of him." Daniel's eyes softened. "That's very kind of you." Emily hesitated. "Some people here, well, they forget that everyone deserves respect." Her words weren't meant to be bold. They were simply true, and Daniel respected truth. Alex returned minutes later with the coffee, which he placed so close to the edge of the table it nearly tipped. "Careful," he muttered. "Don't want to spill anything." Emily shot him a warning look as she approached with the soup. Alex ignored it, leaning back with folded arms. "Try not to take too long eating. We have reservations." Daniel didn't react. He stirred the soup slowly, as if each turn of the spoon told him another piece of who this waiter truly was. When Emily turned to leave, Daniel gently touched her arm, not demanding, just grateful. Your kindness stands out, he said quietly. She smiled. Sometimes kindness is all people have. And then, from across the room, Alex laughed with another server, jerking his chin toward Daniel. He probably came in for the heat, he said loudly, not the food. The table beside him tried not to look, but you could see the discomfort in their eyes. A man in his 70s shook his head, muttering, "No respect these days." Emily brushed past Alex. "You don't have to talk like that," she whispered sharply. "Relax," he said. "He won't be back. People like him never do." Daniel finished quietly, left a generous tip, one Emily would find later, and stood. As he slid into his jacket, something slipped from his pocket. A small folded note. He didn't even notice, not yet. Outside, the sky had dimmed into a soft Tennessee blue. Daniel rested his hand on the old truck's door, exhaling slowly. The night had shown him more than rudeness. It had shown him character. He drove home with a steady resolve rising in him. Tomorrow, the Meridian would learn who he truly was. Emily found the tip under the coffee cup as she wiped the table, and her breath caught at the sight of it. It was more than generous. Far more than someone dressed like that would normally leave. But what moved her wasn't the amount. It was what it meant. Someone had seen her. Someone had appreciated her. She tucked it carefully into her apron and felt a small warmth settle in her chest, the kind that reminded her of the Sundays her grandmother used to talk about grace. But Alex, passing by, only snorted. "Big deal. Probably his whole week's paycheck." "You don't know that," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice level. "Please," Alex scoffed. "Guys like him don't belong here. They're placeholders, taking up good tables for real customers." Emily wiped the last of the coffee ring from the table. "Everyone belongs somewhere, Alex." "Sure," he said, "just not in my section." The rest of the shift continued with its usual rhythm. Plates, silverware, the low hum of conversation. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just walked out of the restaurant. Something heavy. Something unfinished. She didn't know the old man's name, but his calm eyes and quiet patience stayed with her all night, like the lingering warmth of a hymn long after the church doors had closed. The next morning, Daniel sat at the long wooden table in his farmhouse kitchen, the sun catching the dust motes in the air. He ate simply, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. Yet his mind was anything but simple. It circled around the waiter's words, around the tone, around the treatment that revealed more than Alex realized. But more than anything, it kept returning to that folded note he'd unknowingly left behind. He remembered writing it months ago after a board meeting left him disappointed by how quickly people judged one another. He'd scribbled a line that came from a sermon he heard as a boy. "You never know who you're serving, but more importantly, you never know who you're becoming." He had tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket with every intention of giving it to someone someday. But he never imagined that someone would be connected to a night like this. As he rose from the breakfast table, he looked out across the yard at the American flag fluttering in the morning breeze. His father used to say, "Respect isn't earned by money, Danny. It's earned by how you treat the person with the least to offer you." Today that lesson felt heavier than usual. He called his executive assistant, Martha. "Morning, Daniel." She answered cheerfully. "Martha, clear my evening," he said. "Everything?" "Yes. I need to make a stop at the Meridian. As myself this time." There was a short pause. "Should I prepare anything?" "No," he said softly. "This one needs to come from me." Back at the restaurant, Emily arrived early. She moved through the dining room with practiced precision, straightening place settings and checking water glasses. Management trusted her. Customers often requested her. She had the kind of steady warmth older folks loved and younger folks felt drawn to. When she bent down to pick up a stray napkin near the table where Daniel had sat, she noticed something on the floor. Something folded, something that looked like paper. She picked it up, puzzled. A small note, a small crease along the edge. It must have slipped from his pocket. She hesitated, as if opening it might intrude on something private. But curiosity, gentle, respectful curiosity, won. When she unfolded it, her breath caught. You never know who you're serving, but more importantly, you never know who you're becoming. Daniel Cross, she read the name twice. Her eyes widened. No, it can't be, she whispered. Everyone in Tennessee knew the name Daniel Cross. His foundation had helped rebuild homes after the Nashville floods, supported veterans in Maury County, and funded schools across the state. He was respected, admired, almost mythical in the way older generations spoke of hardworking men who never forgot where they came from. Why would someone like him be here? And why? Dressed the way he was. Just then, Alex walked by. What's that? Emily quickly folded the paper. Nothing. His eyes narrowed. It's from that old guy, isn't it? It's none of your business, she said, slipping the note into her apron. He smirked. You care too much, Emily. That's why you're stuck waiting tables instead of doing something better. I'd rather care too much than too little, she shot back. As the day went on, Emily kept the note close. She didn't know what it meant, not exactly, but something told her it was important. Important enough that she'd return it if she ever saw him again. And deep down, she hoped she would. The evening rush began slowly. Nashville's twilight cast long shadows across the polished floors. Customers filtered in. Couples, retirees celebrating anniversaries, business groups wrapping up long days. Everything seemed normal until the double doors at the front opened and silence rippled across the room. Emily turned first. Her eyes widened. It was him, the same man from last night, except now he was someone entirely different. The jacket was gone, the flannel was gone. Tonight he wore dignity like armor, a navy suit, a straight posture, a presence that carried weight without raising its voice. And behind him, two men from his security team kept a respectful distance. Alex saw him next. His mouth opened slightly. Confusion flickered. Then dread. No. Absolutely not, he whispered, stepping back. Emily felt her heart begin to race. Not with fear, but with an awareness that something profound was unfolding. She slipped her hand into her apron and felt the folded note, like a living thing waiting to reveal its truth. The manager hurried out from the back, nearly tripping over himself. Mr. Cross, sir, we weren't expecting... Daniel raised a hand gently. I'm not here for a scene. I'm here for a conversation. His voice was steady, kind, but firm enough to straighten every spine in the room. Alex swallowed hard as Daniel's eyes quietly settled on him. Not angry, not accusing, just seeing him, seeing straight through him. Emily stepped closer, unsure if she should speak, unsure if this was the right moment to return the note. But something told her the story was only beginning to unfold. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. And Daniel, the man Alex had mocked as worthless, now stood before him as the owner, and the one person who could change his future with a single sentence. Alex stood rooted, unsure whether to step forward or melt into the floor. His throat tightened as Daniel walked slowly toward him, each step measured, calm, and impossible to ignore. The dining room had gone so still that even the kitchen noise seemed to hush itself. Daniel stopped only a few feet away from the young waiter. Alex tried to speak, but the words tangled into nothing. Daniel didn't rush him. He simply looked at him with an expression that wasn't anger, but wasn't softness either. It was something heavier, something older. "We need to talk," Daniel said quietly. Alex nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." "Of course, sir. I can explain. I don't want excuses. I want truth." Those words struck harder than raised voices ever could. Emily stood nearby, the folded note still in her apron, her heart pounding like she was watching something sacred or dangerous. She couldn't decide which. The manager approached nervously. "Mr. Cross, would you like to speak in my office?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I'll speak here. Privately enough, but in the open. The truth shouldn't need walls." He turned to Alex. "Walk with me." Alex swallowed and followed him toward a quieter corner of the restaurant. His steps felt heavy, as if shame had weight. When they reached the far wall near the large window overlooking the Nashville skyline, Daniel folded his hands behind his back and stared out for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Tell me," Daniel began softly, "why did you treat me the way you did last night?" Alex shifted nervously. Sir, I was having a rough day. It wasn't personal. I didn't know who you were." Daniel turned slowly. "And that matters?" Alex blinked. "Well, no, but it does to you," Daniel finished for him. "Doesn't it?" Alex looked down at the floor. "Maybe." Daniel took a breath and spoke in a tone that carried truth like a sermon with no pulpit. "You judged me before I said a single word. You decided who I was, what I could afford, where I belonged, and then you acted on that judgment like it was fact." Alex's jaw tightened. "I didn't think—" "No," Daniel interrupted. "You didn't." The words weren't cruel. They were honest. And honesty stung. In the center of the room, Emily couldn't look away. She had seen managers correct staff before. She had heard scolding, frustration, annoyance. But this was different. This felt like a father speaking to a son he desperately wanted to understand the truth. Alex tried again. "Mr. Cross, I didn't mean anything by it. People come in looking like you did, and they usually don't tip or they cause trouble. I was just trying to get through my shift." Daniel nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting that answer. "I grew up in Ohio," he said. "My father worked 3 jobs. He taught me something I've never forgotten. A person's worth isn't written on their clothes. It's written in their heart." He paused. "You missed that last night." Alex's face flushed with a mix of shame and stubbornness. "I know I messed up. I shouldn't have said what I said." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Do you remember everything you said?" Alex stiffened. Maybe not everything." "I do," Daniel said gently. "And the tables around us do. Respect is not a favor you grant only to those who look wealthy enough for it." The silence after those words was heavy enough to bend metal. For a moment, Alex didn't move, didn't breathe. His lips parted like he wanted to defend himself again, but nothing came. His excuses had run dry. Emily stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Cross." "Sir." She held out the folded note. "I think this belongs to you." Daniel looked surprised. He accepted the paper and unfolded it with careful fingers. When he saw the writing, a slow breath left him. "I'd forgotten this," he murmured. He turned it toward Emily. "Where did you find it?" "It fell from your jacket last night," she said softly. "I didn't want it to get lost." Daniel nodded, grateful. "This is something I wrote long ago. Something that helps me remember who I'm supposed to be." Alex craned his neck slightly. What does it say?" Daniel looked at him, not unkindly. "It says, you never know who you're serving. But more importantly, you never know who you're becoming." The words seemed to land like a stone tossed into a still lake. Quiet, but world-shifting. Alex stared at the note. His mouth twitched, but no sound came. For the first time that night, his eyes softened with something real, something almost vulnerable. I didn't know, he whispered. You weren't supposed to know, Daniel replied. That was the point. Character shows when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain. The manager stood at a respectful distance, watching nervously. Guests pretended not to stare, but their ears were tuned sharply to every word. Daniel took a step closer to Alex. Do you think you treated me the way a person should be treated? Alex shook his head. No, sir. Do you think you treated Emily the way a teammate should be treated? Alex hesitated. No. And do you believe you treated this restaurant, the one you represent, with dignity? Alex's chest rose and fell. No, sir, I didn't. Daniel let the silence settle again. But this time, it wasn't punishment. It was space. Space for Alex to feel the full weight of the truth. Space for the moment to change something inside him. Emily held her breath. Alex wiped a hand across his forehead. Mr. Cross, am I fired? Daniel looked at him, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with the kind of sorrow only older men knew how to express. No, he said softly. Firing you would be too easy. Alex blinked, confused. Then, what happens now? Daniel folded the note carefully and slipped it into his suit pocket. What happens now, he said, is the beginning of something you will never forget. And the restaurant felt the shift, an invisible hinge turning in the store's door. Alex felt his heart stumble in his chest as Daniel's words settled between them. The beginning of something he would never forget. What did that mean? A second chance? A punishment? His mind spun through every possibility at once, none of them good. Daniel turned slightly, glancing toward the dining room where the quiet hum of nervous whispers had begun to ripple. But his voice remained calm, steady, almost pastoral. Come, he said softly. Let's step outside for a moment. Alex hesitated, then followed. He felt like a child being led to a place where truths got told and excuses stopped working. Emily watched them go, pressing a hand to her chest. She hoped the right thing was coming, whatever that meant. Outside, the night carried the cool Tennessee air, washing against the tension inside the restaurant. Streetlights glowed against parked cars, distant traffic hummed like a low prayer. Daniel walked a few steps away from the entrance and turned. Alex, how old are you? He asked gently. 32, Alex replied, unsure why it mattered. And how long have you been working here? Almost 4 years. Daniel nodded. In 4 years, has anyone ever sat you down and talked to you about the way you treat people? Alex looked away. Not really. I mean, management mentioned stuff, but nothing serious. Daniel studied him for a long moment. Why do you think that is? Alex shrugged helplessly. People don't care enough to deal with me, I guess? No, Daniel said softly. They don't believe you would listen. A sharp, unexpected ache pulled through Alex's chest. Something about those words, simple, honest, unforced, hit him harder than any lecture ever had. He swallowed. Maybe they were right. Daniel took a slow breath. Tell me something. Why do you speak to people the way you spoke to me? Alex didn't answer at first. He stared at the pavement, taking in the tiny cracks, the small imperfections lit by the street lamp. I guess I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of being looked down on. Tired of being broke. Tired of customers talking to me like I'm nothing. Daniel nodded, almost sadly. So instead of breaking the cycle, you joined it. Alex closed his eyes briefly, the truth piercing through him. Yeah, maybe I did. Daniel stepped closer, not threatening, but steady. You're not the only one who's been tired in life. I grew up poor. I grew up working jobs where people assumed they knew everything about me. We all face that. But we don't get to let our wounds turn into weapons. Alex stared at him with something like dawning realization. I messed up bad, didn't I? Yes, Daniel said. You did. But mistakes are not the end of the story, unless you insist on making them permanent. Alex looked up, blinking fast to hold back something that felt dangerously close to regret. So, what happens now? If you're not firing me, what do you want me to do? Daniel reached into his suit pocket and pulled out the folded note again. He stared at it thoughtfully, as if the ink carried weight. You see this message? I wrote this years ago when I realized how easily the world forgets empathy. I kept it close to remind myself who I want to be. But last night, he glanced up. Last night I realized someone else needed this lesson more than I did. Alex watched him, unsure whether to feel humbled or terrified. You were going to work, Daniel said gently, but not here, not for the next month. Alex stiffened. Where? At my foundation. The words sank in slowly, as if they needed room to reach him. Your foundation? Yes, Daniel said. You will serve meals at the shelter. You will help load supplies for the veterans program. You will spend real time with real people who know hardship far deeper than anything you've experienced. And when you return, if you return, you will know what it means to serve with humility. Alex stared at him, speechless. You want me to volunteer? No, Daniel corrected. I want you to transform. Alex's throat tightened. Why? Why give me a chance at all? I was horrible to you. Daniel smiled faintly. Because kindness is only real when it's tested. And because someone must choose to break the cycle. You weren't taught how to do that, so I'm giving you a chance to learn. Alex rubbed his hands together, the cold biting through his skin. This sounds like punishment. No, Daniel murmured. Punishment is easy. Growth is hard. A gust of wind swept past, rustling the trees lining the sidewalk. Alex looked up at the sky as if expecting it to give him an answer. His mind tangled with pride, shame, fear, and something else. Something unsteady and unfamiliar. Mr. Cross, what if I fail? He whispered. Then we try again, Daniel said. No one changes overnight. Alex felt something crumble inside him, not his confidence, not his dignity, but the walls he had built around himself. The ones that protected him from caring. The ones that kept guilt away. The ones that allowed him to treat strangers like inconveniences instead of people. He shook his head slowly. I don't deserve this chance. Most people don't, Daniel said softly. But we give it anyway. Inside the restaurant, Emily watched through the glass doors, her hands pressed lightly against her apron. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the shift in Alex's posture, the way his shoulders dropped, the way he looked smaller somehow, more human. And she saw the gentleness in Daniel's expression, the kind that came from a faith deeper than words. When Daniel and Alex finally stepped back inside, the room quieted again. Daniel approached Emily first. Thank you for your kindness last night, he said. Emily smiled, stunned. I just did what was right. That's why it matters, he said. Alex stood behind them, looking lost but strangely hopeful. Daniel turned to him. Report to the foundation tomorrow morning. Ask for Mr. Granger. He will guide you. Alex nodded slowly. I'll be there. Daniel gave him a small nod of approval and turned to leave. But he stopped just before reaching the door, looking back at Alex and Emily as if marking this moment permanently in his memory. There was something shifting in the air. Something like a beginning. Daniel stepped out into the night, leaving behind a waiter who suddenly realized that the path ahead of him would not be easy. But it might finally lead him somewhere he'd never allowed himself to go. Somewhere better. Alex barely slept that night. He lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling as memories from the restaurant replayed in brutal clarity. His tone, his arrogance, the look in Daniel's eyes when he asked, "Why did you treat me that way?" It all churned together until the shame felt like a weight on his chest. Yet beneath that weight, something else flickered. A strange, unwelcome hope. A hope that maybe this month could change him. A hope he didn't trust. Morning came too quickly. He dressed quietly, choosing clothes that didn't make him feel like a fraud. No polished shoes, no attempts to look important. Just jeans, a plain shirt, and a hesitant heart. He drove across Nashville toward the address, written on a small slip of paper the manager had given him before he left. The Cross Foundation Service Center sat beside a modest church on 8th Avenue, its brick walls faded by time but its windows bright. People lined up outside, a mix of seniors, mothers with children, and tired veterans with worn backpacks. The reality of the place struck Alex immediately. These weren't difficult customers. These were people holding on to the edges of life. He stepped out of his car with a nervous breath. Inside, a tall, older man with silver hair and tired eyes greeted him. "You must be Alex," he said. "I'm Mr. Granger. Daniel told me to expect you." "Yes, sir," Alex said quickly. "I'm here to help." Mr. Granger studied him for a moment, not unkindly. "Good. Let's see where you fit in." They walked through the hallway where volunteers sorted bags of donated groceries. Someone laughed loudly at a joke. Someone else cried quietly as a volunteer comforted them. Everything felt raw and real. No polished dining room, no forced smiles, just people. Mr. Granger handed Alex an apron. "You'll start in the kitchen today. We serve lunch to about 200 folks. You'll be plating meals and handing them out?" Alex nodded, throat tight. The kitchen buzzed with activity. Pots simmered, trays clattered, and volunteers moved with coordinated purpose. One woman, small but strong, stirred a giant pot of stew with practiced rhythm. She glanced at Alex. "New?" "Yes," he replied. "Good. Grab a ladle. Don't splash." He almost smiled. Almost. As the doors opened for lunch service, Alex stood behind the counter with a tray of plates. People filed past slowly. The first person was an elderly man wearing a veteran's cap. His hands trembled slightly as he held out the tray. Alex handed him a plate, trying to offer a polite smile. The veteran paused, looking him over. "Thank you, son," he said quietly, the kind of gratitude that didn't need to be exaggerated to be felt. "You're welcome," Alex murmured. The next was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a child clinging to her coat. "We appreciate this," she whispered as Alex handed her the food. The little girl peeked at him shyly. He nodded again, unsure why his chest ached the way it did. The line continued. Every face told a story. Every voice carried something heavy, and every thank you landed deeper than the one before. 2 hours later, when the last tray was stacked, Alex leaned against the wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. He hadn't expected this strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity. Mr. Granger walked over. "How was your first day?" Alex exhaled shakily, harder than waiting tables. Mr. Granger chuckled. "Real service usually is." Alex nodded. "These people, they didn't do anything wrong." "No," Mr. Granger said. Most didn't. Life just hit them harder than they were prepared for. He paused. It's easy to forget that when you're on the other side of the counter. Over the next week, Alex returned every morning. He served meals, packed food boxes, sorted clothing donations, and listened to stories that unsettled him in ways he couldn't describe. One afternoon, a veteran named Howard lingered near the counter after receiving his meal. "You're new?" he said, adjusting his cap. "Yeah," Alex replied, "just helping out." Howard studied him. "You had a rough start, huh? I can see it in your eyes." Alex frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're angry at yourself," Howard said. "That's where change starts." Alex swallowed hard. "Maybe." Howard smiled. "Good. Then you're in the right place." The words struck him unexpectedly. He carried them through the day like stones that polished themselves in his pocket. By the second week, the work grew harder, but something inside Alex began to shift. He found himself listening more, judging less. He realized how often he had assumed things about people based on their appearances, assumptions that now embarrassed him. One morning, as he helped unload a delivery truck, he overheard two volunteers whisper to each other. "That's the guy from the restaurant, isn't it?" "Yeah. Mr. Cross brought him here. I heard he treated him real badly." Funny how life works out. Alex froze. Shame burned hot under his skin, but instead of walking away, he took a deep breath and kept working. He was learning that humility wasn't a soft feeling. It was a painful one. Toward the end of his third week, Emily walked into the foundation lobby holding a small box of donated hygiene kits. She spotted him immediately. "Alex," she said softly. He nearly dropped the clipboard he was holding. "Emily? What are you doing here?" "I volunteer here on Thursdays," she said with a small smile. "I have for years." He felt a sting of guilt. "Of course you do." She stepped closer. "How's it going?" He looked around at the busy room, at the volunteers rushing to prepare dinner. "It's eye-opening." Emily nodded. "I figured something would change in you." He shook his head. "You figured wrong. Everything is changing, not just something." She smiled gently. "Good. Then it's working." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Emily, I'm sorry. For before. For how I spoke. For how I acted. You didn't deserve that." Her eyes softened. "Thank you. That means something." "It should have come sooner," he said. "Better late than never," she replied. As she walked toward the storage room, Alex felt an unfamiliar warmth settle inside him, a sense of hope, small but persistent. That evening, after the center closed, Alex stayed behind to sweep the dining area. As he dragged the broom across the floor, the door opened and a familiar figure stepped in. Daniel. Alex froze. "Good evening," Daniel said. "Mr. Cross, I didn't know you were coming. I wanted to see how you were doing." Alex swallowed. "It's been intense." Daniel looked around the quiet room. "And have you learned anything?" Alex nodded, eyes lowering. "More than I expected. More than I wanted, honestly." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's usually how growth works." Alex took a slow breath. "I'm trying. I really am." "I know," Daniel said. "That's why I came." Alex stared at him, unsure what came next. Daniel stepped closer. "Your month is nearly over. The question now is who you want to be when it ends." Those words didn't feel like a warning. They felt like an invitation. And Alex realized he wanted to answer it. Truthfully. Alex stood there with the broom still in his hands, looking at Daniel as though the older man carried the weight of a final exam. The kind that determined not grades, but the direction of a life. Daniel's quiet question echoed inside him. Who do you want to be when it ends? "I don't know yet," Alex admitted. "But I know who I don't want to be anymore. Daniel nodded. That's a start. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the room like a low choir. Outside, the last hints of daylight softened into dusk. Daniel walked slowly across the room, running a thoughtful hand along one of the tables. When I was your age, he said, I made mistakes I couldn't undo, but I could outgrow them. That's what you're doing here. Not fixing the past, growing beyond it. Alex swallowed. Do you think I'm worth that? Daniel looked up, eyes steady and kind. If I didn't, you'd still be at the restaurant. The words hit deeper than discipline ever could. Alex lowered his broom, suddenly aware that this moment wasn't about punishment or proving anything. It was about honesty, about stepping into a new version of himself without knowing if he'd fit. Thank you, he whispered. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture, but strong enough to still the tremble in Alex's breath. Finish the month, then come see me. He turned and walked out, leaving Alex standing in the quiet. And for the first time in his adult life, Alex felt something warm press behind his ribs, something that felt like possibility. The last week of his month arrived quickly. Alex worked harder than he ever had in the restaurant, lifting boxes, organizing supplies, handing out meals, sweeping floors, wiping tables. Something about the people here made him want to rise to the occasion, to give more than he had to. Their gratitude softened him. Their stories humbled him. Their struggles reshaped him. One afternoon, Howard, the veteran, approached him again after lunch. Heard you're almost done here, he said. Yeah, Alex replied. One more day. Howard nodded. You gonna be the same man when you leave? Alex shook his head. No, I don't think I could be if I tried. Howard patted his shoulder. Good. The world already has enough of that man. Alex smiled faintly. For once, he didn't disagree. On his final day, Emily returned to volunteer. When she saw him serving meals with quiet attention, she paused, watching him with a soft expression. He caught her looking and felt a faint, unfamiliar warmth crawl up his neck. You did it, she said when the lunch rush ended. I'm not done, he said quietly. I don't think I'll ever be done. She tilted her head. You've changed. Thank you. It's not a compliment, she teased gently. It's an observation. He laughed, a real laugh, one that felt like the first honest sound he'd made in years. After cleanup, he found a small envelope tucked beside the volunteer sign-in sheet. His name was written on the front in neat handwriting. Inside was a short note. Come to the Meridian at 6 p.m. D. His pulse quickened. He wasn't sure if this was the end or another test. Exactly 6 o'clock. Alex walked into the restaurant. Not as an employee, not as the arrogant waiter he used to be, but as someone stepping into whatever came next. He wore no uniform, no apron, only a clean shirt and a quiet sense of purpose. The dining room looked different somehow, warmer, brighter, less intimidating. Daniel sat at a corner table, reviewing something on a tablet. When he saw Alex, he smiled and gestured for him to sit. You finished your month, Daniel said. Yes, sir. Did you learn what you needed to learn? Alex exhaled. I learned that I was wrong. About people, about myself, about everything. And have you changed? Alex looked down at his hands. I'm working on it. Daniel nodded. Good. He leaned back in his chair, studying Alex with thoughtful eyes. I have a question for you. Do you want to return to work here? Alex hesitated. I do, but I don't deserve it. Deserve? Daniel repeated softly. Grace isn't about deserving. Alex looked at him, perplexed. Daniel continued. I'm willing to give you your job back, but not the old job. Something better? Alex blinked. Better? Why? Because, Daniel said, someone who has seen what you've seen can help others see what truly matters. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal, one for Alex to assist in training staff on compassion, service, and empathy. It wasn't a promotion, it was a calling. You want me to help run hospitality training? Alex asked, stunned. Yes. You learn the hard way what many people never learn. Daniel smiled. That makes you qualified. Alex felt a lump gather in his throat. I won't let you down. You will, Daniel said lightly. We all do sometimes. But you'll get back up. Alex laughed softly, shaking his head in disbelief. Why are you giving me this chance? Daniel tapped the folded note he now kept in his inner pocket. Because someone once gave me one. Alex exhaled shakily. A silence settled between them, not heavy anymore, but full. Emily walked in at that moment, carrying a tray of menus. She spotted the two of them and smiled warmly. Daniel waved her over. Emily, he said, meet your new training partner. Her eyebrows lifted. Really? Yes, Daniel replied. I think you two will make a strong team. She looked at Alex with a hint of pride. I think so too. Alex couldn't speak for a moment. All he could do was breathe. Daniel rose from the table. One more thing. Alex looked up. Remember the note, Daniel said. Live it. He placed a hand on Alex's shoulder, then walked away. Quiet, steady, dignified, leaving behind a young man who was no longer defined by his mistakes, but by the journey he took to rise above them. Alex stood there, the restaurant bustling softly around him, the warmth of transformation still settling in his chest. He whispered, the words to himself, barely audible. You never know who you're serving, and you never know who you're becoming. For the first time in his life, he was becoming someone better, someone new, someone worthy. And as he looked at Emily smiling beside him and the doors Daniel walked through, Alex realized something. Grace wasn't just given. It was meant to be carried forward. If this journey touched your heart, I'd love for you to subscribe and stay with us for more stories that remind us what grace, humility, and second chances can do. And before you leave, share your thoughts in the comments. Moments like this mean more when we feel them together.